Today is the day of reconciliation. Now, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu famously labeled us the Rainbow Nation, as you might recall. But are we truly united in our diversity, and have the wounds of colonialism and apartheid healed properly? We see reports still today of incidents of racism. Poverty and inequality seems to be growing on a daily basis. And of course, this may lead us to believe that we're a nation that's still divided. Now, this is a very complex issue. I'm joined now by the Afrikaner-born Chief Secretary Jan Bosman and the Study in Poverty and Inequality Institute Director Isobel Fry. Isobel and Jan, good morning. Thank you very much, Jan and Isobel, for joining us this morning. I wanted to talk to you particularly on the back of the newsletter by President Ramaphosa on Monday, where he talks about a number of things that we could be doing as a country to heal ourselves and unite ourselves more. And he's talking about, there are small things that each and every one of us can do, like learning one another's language, reaching across the racial divide. But before we discuss a little bit more on that, can I start with you, Jan, and say, when you look at South Africa today, are we reconciled enough? Have we made progress as a country in terms of reconciliation, Jan?
Good morning, Dan, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I think in the last couple of years, and especially the last decade, we have seen a decline in race relations in this country. We're growing apart by the day. We're seeing the polarization growing, and we have addressed this on various occasions in correspondence to the president, the current president, but also to the previous president, Mr. Zuma. And I think we can start by finding that the one problem is that we've moved away from our constitution in the first sentence where it said that we, the people of South Africa, and that started changing to I, the politician, I, the corrupt official, I, the political party, or we, or me, the political party. I think we lost sense of the meaning of the preamble in the Constitution. That in the first place. And then the second place is that in 2012, government released the National Development Plan of South Africa. And that plan has been buried in the dust coffers of government. And it says that our nation-building effort has been more difficult in periods of slower economic growth. South Africa cannot afford a downward spiral that sharpens social tensions. That was government's own admission in 2012, and I think since then we've moved downhill faster than we thought.
And Isobel, what is your view on reconciliation? Where are we at today?
Thanks, Dan. It's a very interesting topic and one that I thought a lot about in preparation for this discussion that we're having. I don't think that the term reconciliation is a useful one. Having studied Latin for 6 years to become a lawyer in the old days, reconciliation, if broken down, means to go back. I think that we should be looking in this country at transformation, because if we go back, that takes us to the silos of apartheid separateness. Now, the other thing that I was looking at in preparation for today was looking at what are the divisions that do divide us, because we need to be looking forward to the ties that bind us. I mean, we know, for instance, that in terms of demographics, 80% of South Africa's population is Black African, that 9% are colored, 3% are Indian, and just under 9% are white. And yet we're defined by norms that go back to a time where white was dominant. So, for instance, perceptions are important. I was in a meeting the other day, and a friend of mine said, well, you look and see all the whites are clustered together. Now, that's not an act of defiance, but it's not an act of transformation. I think that in terms of true reconciliation, which interestingly enough, the Shona word for transformation or change is, of course, Shanduka. If we look at where we want to go, we need to look at those bridges that will bring us together. Another interesting issue, Dan, is that of language, because transformation is, again, it's more than just the formal equity. So if you look at languages spoken in South Africa, isiZulu is spoken by far more people, both inside and outside the house, than, for instance, English. And yet the president addresses us in English. The official languages of most communications is English. So is that something which is trying to divide us as a lingua franca, English? Are we excluding more people who don't have the capacity to learn English as fluently as others for whom it's a mother tongue? So I think that rather than just trying to take a paintbrush and whitewash or blackwash issues. I think we need to understand what we're trying to build through the transformation that your other guests spoke to in terms of the Constitution. We're looking for a transformation, not for putting back to a state that was never a happy state.
Well, unfortunately, this day is not known as a day of transformation. That's why we're using the word reconciliation. The president himself raises the issue of language in his weekly newsletter, and he quotes Jan and Isobel from last year's National Barometer on Reconciliation. And he says it is noteworthy, and I'm reading here from the president's newsletter, that most South Africans report that they would like to interact more often with people from other race groups, but cite language and confidence as the two greatest barriers. So you've hit the nail on the head when you talk about language. Jan, do you speak more than Afrikaans and English as languages in South Africa?
I must admit I cannot, and that's
why not? Why not? Why not? Why not, Jan?
I think the school I went to only concentrated maybe on Afrikaans and English, and also German as a third subject, or Latin. That was the languages that concentrated on. But I think that changed in the education system today, where children do have the opportunity to learn third or fourth languages. I do agree. I think it's a very important part of bringing people together, but we also need to change the environment that we have. We can come with all these symbolic gestures, and not learning a language is not only a symbolic gesture, it's a practical means of bridging divides. But to change only that, or to have only a language, a third or a fourth language, if the environment is poisonous, if the environment is the one that is giving this aura of taking us apart, then that must change, and that's what we've been pleading for all along: is to change the environment. It cannot help if we have only one day in a year celebrating Reconciliation Day, but on the 364 other days of the year, we're preaching and practicing racism, and we're practicing hatred, and we're practicing division, and that cannot work. So we need to be total.
Yeah, Isobel, what about you and languages? Do you only speak English?
But not very much. I'm trying. That's what you were saying about confidence. So I have very little confidence when I am speaking these languages.
Yeah,
and that brings me to another point in that.
Yeah, sorry, Isabel, to cut in. Jan talks about environment, and you are trying, and it's very important. But this is a practical example of how we can try and reach out. Because, Jan, in my view, no matter the environment, but if you try and reach out and create a space where there's meaningful communication, and I mean the bulk of our people in the country, as Isobel has pointed out, speak isiZulu, you would be able to foster an environment where you're reaching out to each other. Would you agree with that, Jan? Would you try to learn another language?
I think this language is but one part of this that needs to change. That we need to be able to speak to one another in a language, or be it Xhosa or be it Zulu. But there's also other things that we need to bring into this conversation.
Yes.
Amongst them, for instance, respect for each other, understanding for each other. That is also lacking.
Yeah, but if somebody understands that you are trying, like Isobel is trying, to speak their language, I'm sure they'll respect you a little bit more. We don't have much more time to talk about this, and I get your point. But Isobel, because of the hat that you wear, I need to raise this and get your quick view, and also from Jan. One of the issues that the president raises is that unless in this country we deal decisively with inequality and poverty, it will remain a huge obstacle to reconciliation and therefore transformation. What do you think we need to do differently after 26 years, Isobel, to make a dent on poverty and inequality?
Thanks, Dan. I was wanting to jump in onto the question of environment because, again, on reflection, there is no way that we can talk about meaningful reconciliation when we are the most unequal country in the world. For me, very briefly, I think if you look at gender, race, of course, as well as class, we haven't done enough. I mean, for me, the fascinating thing, and statistics are my bread and butter, is that 43% of children are raised in female-headed households by mothers only, Women are the ones who carry the bulk of our society, and yet we still have huge levels of gender-based violence. So the question of power needs to be looked at. We cannot continue with the levels of inequality. Many people working in social justice have called for the introduction of a wealth tax, a land tax. One of the disappointing things for me in this building back better after COVID is that we're not looking at the use of resources that exist, whether they're privately tied up in family trusts, in large amounts of land that are held by people. Okay. We need to look at ways in which we distribute that.
Sorry, Isabel. Sorry to come in there to cut you. Thanks for that. Jan, your parting words. You got less than a minute, unfortunately.
I do agree with President Ramaphosa. I think that we have a bigger divide in this society, but the president himself can go back and look at decades that preceded him. And I think the best years that we had of reconciliation was in a time of nation building, was in a time of economic growth. That was in the time of Mr. Nelson Mandela in the 1990s, early 2000s. That was when everybody strived towards the rainbow nation that we so often talked about, where we had economic growth and people respected and trusted each other. That all changed, and we need to relook the National Development Plan, which faulted government in bringing people apart.
Jan Bosman and Isabel Fry, thank you very much for your insights. Unfortunately, this is where we're going to have to end it, and that's all from me for today. At 9:30 shortly, you're going to be watching Crime Watch, and then at the top of the hour, at 10 o'clock, my partner, Yuveka, will bring you the latest news headlines. Stay on eNCA. Have a safe and meaningful Reconciliation Day. Take time to reflect what you're going to do to give this country more of a human face, as Steve Biko told us in the 70s.